let's start. Today we have a lecture for the course, guest lecture for the course Security, Privacy and Compliance. And it is a great lecture that will be given by Fabiola Moyon. And it is related to immediately two kind of main concepts within the course. It is both security and compliance. And the topic for today is DevSecOps Compliance, something that is super important in modern software engineering. And yeah, without further ado, I would like to hand over to Fabiola. Fabiola, please.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Alex, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. So today we will be talking about compliance in DevSecOps. I will take a minute to share my screen, so you can please confirm that you see it in 1 more minute or second. Yeah, it was quite quick.
Yes, we can see it. Thanks.
Yeah, great. So thank you very much. So a bit of let me introduce a bit of maybe why I am talking to you about DevSecOps and compliance. So I'm working currently for Siemens AG in a department called Security Lifecycle, and my role is to introduce and to support our business units to improve security of their agile development and DevOps processes. I have two let's say two role paths. So one is as practitioner and another one as academic. In the practitioner role, I was also supporting organizations to manage security risks. And as part of this big scope that is enterprise risk. Also, I hold a role as a Chief Information Security Officer for a bank. And this gave me the opportunity to understand the challenges that are there with regard to cybersecurity from the perspective of the ones that need to approach the attacks and the ones that need to plan how to survive attacks, and also how to combine all the activities with compliance and so many standards, and at the end support the business with this. Yeah, in my academic life, I'm honored to be holding this lecture of DevSecOps for PROMIS since last year. Also, I pursue a PhD title with the Technical University Munich in a research environment, also with BTH and with the Institute Fortis in the topic of security compliance in DevOps. And this group that we call Empire is a lab where there are several researchers that are related to this practitioners world and also academic world together. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be able to share with you a bit of the knowledge that I have with security compliance. And moreover, I would like to hear from you what can be, want to hear from you some questions. If you have any comments, please let me know. Let's make this talk a bit more interactive. And to doing this, I would like to ask you, so let me get to know you a bit. So of course we cannot, because of the time, we need to find a more interactive way. So let me ask you, and you can raise hands with Zoom. So for example, please raise hands those that are working in an engineering role. So this means that you are either coding or managing infrastructure or working directly into the development or operations of any product, any software. Okay. Some hands are raised. You can also look in the chat. Okay. Good. Thank you. Then can please raise hands those that have like a management role, a role that is product owner, a scrum master, that are working in quality. Okay, so we have like 4 and 2, 3 people, 3 people. Yeah. Good. So we have a good mix. Raise hands if somebody has any other role that is not engineering or related, management related. Do we have any auditors here in the group? Okay, not yet. Yeah, then we can say we focus on the team. Then another question. Could you please raise hands if your project has a setup with DevOps? DevOps related. So Oscar, Johan, Sriti. Good. Thank you. So does it applies then if I ask you please to raise hands those that are working in agile development context, following agile development practices? Thank you. Next question is if there are in the group anybody that has a role related with security. This can be security engineer, security consultant, security secure champion. Nice, okay, 3. Good. May I know which role? Can somebody share? Which type of role? Samir, you are the last one with the raised hand. So you are invited to talk. Okay, let's move forward then. Thank you. Okay, so we have a good mix of project engineers, security engineers, business related managers, and also some of us are working with DevOps, some of us are working in agile development, and I assume that those that didn't raise hands. Samir, you ready to talk?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not used to use this tool, so I was trying to find the way how to unmute myself.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So you asked regarding the security role.
Yeah.
I can just mention that I work as a project security manager. So that's the role we have. So the products we deliver to customers, we need to evaluate from the security perspective and make sure that they are protected. So I am kind of a link between the customer and the development teams in my company. And then we have to show that we are following certain processes, both internal and external.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Samir, for sharing. Okay, so let's move forward. So we have a set as a good mix. So I hope I can manage the language for and give messages for all of you. So I think the lecture would be nice because we will get an overview for what is related to the management perspective, and we will also get at some point into the good level of detail for those that are engineering, I hope. So the agenda for today is actually get to know what is this lecture about, then we talk about the standards, then we will be talking about agile development and DevOps, and finally you will get a chance to take to look at what can be the activities that needs to be done in order to look for security compliance, achieve security compliance in DevOps. And let's start with this image. This is an illustration from a drawer, a German drawer that I follow and like a lot, is Christoph Niemann. So, and this image to me reflects exactly what is the main point of learning security. And this is, or taking an approach for security, which is risk. To me, this illustration gives me the perception that we don't know in which moment this will break. When you are working as managers, when you're working in your engineering teams, or when you're working in any role in the company, and you talk about we need to improve security, or we need to protect our products, we are always referring to protect them from a possible attack, protecting from our system break, and that this may affect our business, and that means that our business is in risk. And if we look at what the standards said about risk, there are several definitions, and the one that I brought for you is the definition from the ISO 31000. And it says that risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. If I come back to the image before, this is, I think this is a good illustration, because it means, yeah, okay, this is uncertain. We don't know when this will break, but we know that this may happen. And when we talk about risks, and when we talk about there is uncertainty that our system may be attacked, we don't know if this will happen. We don't know if this will not happen, but we know that it is a possibility. At the end, we feel like here in this image, we are betting. So have you played these machines? And then you said, okay, I bet 1 that I will get the 3, that I will be lucky on that. Not saying that getting an attack is, is a lucky thing, but at the end, if there is an attack and you as a team manage to survive the attack, this is actually a positive thing. So if I would like to bring you for this lecture to this mindset that you are here before forward this machine, and then you need to bet. You need to bet that the actions that you are taking in your daily basis with regard to security are the good ones. And there is uncertainty because you are doing as much as possible or the best that you want. So Samir said, I am a product engineer. I need to evaluate that the products are secure. So you're a person working in an environment, but you cannot bet that everything is done perfectly. And getting to this bet, I would like to come to the first takeaway of this lecture, which is in regulated, and it starts with the mindset that in regulated environments, let's say banking, industry, security, and the aspects of security should come from the regulator's demands, because businesses are heavily influenced by regulations. If a business does not comply with some standard that is a requirement, then there is no business. And this means that when companies would like to achieve compliance, they need to implement the security requirements that the standards tell them. The bet here that you are doing in this machine is that this compliance with security standards will reduce risk. So you are all here to hear a lecture about security compliance and DevOps, because we believe that if we comply with the standards, then we will reduce the risks of the systems. And this is our belief, and this is also the belief from the regulators. Why I am saying this is a bet? Because there are a lot of discussions of being compliant makes you secure, or being secure makes you compliant. You will, at the end of the class, we will come back to this, and this is at the end. So this is a conclusion that you can only bet, you can only gamble and say, yeah, okay, if I comply with the standards, I would also assume that I am secure. The thing is, to be in compliant and to have a good level of compliance is very challenging, and it also implies a lot of investment from the organization. And sometimes, in reality, we don't get this budget to really accomplish a full compliance of the standards. So takeaway number 1, compliance with security standards reduce risk. Then let's talk a bit about security standards. And there are several security standards in the world. I assume, please raise hands those that know at least 3 security standards, or that have heard about 3 security standards. Please raise hands. Alex is raising hand, but Alex, you hold the lecture of security compliance. You're out of scope. Okay, so we get already four raised hands. Thank you. Yeah. Can please raise hands somebody that have heard about more than 3 security standards? Samir, you are the product engineer of security. This is also. Anna, would you like to share which standards you have heard of? Please.
Yeah, sure. So we have frameworks and standards in ISO 27000 series. We have the NIST framework. We also have the European ones, the NIS, and a few other ones as well. So there are frameworks like SABSA and others, which a lot of people follow as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. So Anna mentioned standards that are published by ISO, which is the ISO 27001. And in the slide that you see, and then another standards also. And she also mentioned some frameworks, security frameworks. So in the world of security norms, there are several types. For this lecture, I would like to focus on security standards, which are those documents that contain requirements and that were published by international associations for regulation, like ISO, IEC, IEEE. And if I would like to simplify the whole set of standards, I think for the lecture, we could say that, or for our purposes of secure product development, there are 3 groups. One is those standards that focus on processes. These standards basically said when there is a process to develop software, there should be some security activities involved. And if we think about the security activity, this is any activity that improves the security of the process of the software. For example, or the software product or of the industrial product. It depends. Some industries are working only with software. Some other industries have software, hardware-based systems. One of the most known security activities is performing threat modeling, which means identify the threats that can affect your system. There are other security activities like testing or like analysis of code. So these standards that focus on processes look that the development process contains security activities. There is another group that can be standards that focus on technical aspects. So these are standards that look or that give requirements for specific applications or infrastructure, such as standards tell, for example, there should be multi-factor authentication, or there should be encryption at rest, encryption during transport of the system. This is the type of standards. And then another group that focus on data management, and these standards are the ones that says if you have data somewhere, if you have information, you need to protect. And the most known standard for this is the standard about the information security management system. Anna mentioned the ISO 27001. This is a standard that says any company managing information, or any organization, the terminology is organization that manages some information, needs to protect it. And protecting information at the end with regard to security means that protecting that the information keeps confidential, that the information is available, and that the information has integrity. For the lecture today, we will be talking about the standards with focus on the process, because the objective or DevOps at the end, and agile development, these are life cycles, and these are development life cycles, and they are a description, they describe processes. So the focus with compliance, security compliance in DevOps and agile, it starts with focus on the process. I brought to you 2 examples of the standards that may be of your interest to comply in your companies. You may have heard of them. The one is IEC 6244341. This is the standard for secure product development in industrial control systems. So these can be applied not only for systems, industrial control systems, but also for other development of systems. And this standard contains 8 chapters, and they call the chapters practices. And here you would see, if we would like to look at some of these examples, there's a chapter about security management, and this refers on how the people is managed in the organization, which roles, which responsibilities. There is a chapter about security requirements specification. This is about how to design which requirements should be there. There is a chapter about security implementation. This practice 4 talks about coding and the management of code and security of the code. And there are other practices that you may know also when you have seen about security: verification and testing, management of issues. This means that any problem that appear during the process and has a security focus should be well managed. Then security update, you have, updating systems when there are patches for security, and security guidelines, which is a chapter that says there should be instructions to continuously manage the security of a system. Another standard, and this was mentioned also by Anna, this is the NIST 800-218. So this is called the Secure Software Development Framework. This is relevant mostly in the US or for systems developed that are running in US. And the standard has 4 chapters. The first chapter is Prepare the Organization. And this is again, this idea of security management from the standard, the IEC 6244341. So they consider the people, the roles, the responsibilities, a big part of how security can be implemented in a process. The next step is protect the software. Is produce well secure software. This means development process itself. So the typical phases: design, requirements, design, implementation, testing, and so on. Then it comes protect the software. This is, they focus on security functionalities. This is a difference from the standard with the IEC 6244341. The previous standard refers mostly to this, to prepare the organization, produce well software, and respond to vulnerabilities. And the part of protecting the software, which is technical aspects of the software, is involved in another chapter for the IEC 6244341. It comes in another separate standard, but for the NIST, this is part of the Secure Software Development Framework. Anna mentioned another standard from Europe. Yeah, most of what I can say is that most of the standards that refer development processes contains what in these 2 standards are already there or can be easily mapped. One aspect that you should take care when you work on your organizations, if there is already another security standards that are business relevant, and maybe do you have already a secure development process in your organization? Sometimes organizations have their own security teams or security process teams, and these process departments develop already what can be a development process, a secure development process. And you and your company need to comply first with this framework, and then this department takes care that this framework that is developed for the company can be also is also compliant with other standards. This is mostly true for big companies. So if we go to the takeaway number 2, security standards that focus on processes describe a secure development process, and a secure development process is any development process that has security activities integrated. The project team should apply the security activities in the development. And the bet that you do here again in the machine is that the secure development process that you implemented will deliver secure software products. So if the development process that you're following has an activity to do threat modeling, that you bet that performing the threat modeling in the way that your team is performing threat modeling will reduce risk, and that therefore this will help you to produce secure software products. In the practice, sometimes even if the teams has these activities or they perform threat modeling, it can be that the method to perform threat model is not sufficiently good enough to analyze the threats, or maybe they analyze the threats, but they do not classify well the criticality. And this means that sometimes we don't take attention to the real threats. Or sometimes, this is I can tell you, sometimes when you analyze threats, not sometimes, when you analyze threats, you need to know well your system and have a good overview of your systems. And sometimes the systems have evolved a lot in the time that there is not yet an updated system overview. And when somebody look at the threats for the system, is looking at the threats for the system version 1.0 when the system is already in version 5. So even if there is an activity to perform threat modeling, even if you are doing like with the sequences basing in the system overview, it happens that this is not effective, and that this secure development process will not deliver secure products. So again, we are here in this gambling situation. Until this point, do we have any question or comment? No? Then please thumbs up to move forward. Could you react? Okay, if we get 5, then we go forward. We're only 4. We still need 5. Okay, good. Thank you. Then let's move to the next topic: agile development and DevOps. For a lecture to explain what is agility and DevOps, it could be a lot of time, yeah. And I want to bring to you a summary that may serve for your purposes of today and also in your organizations. So agility and DevOps can be seen from several perspectives. I think it's good to look them from the philosophy first, because agility and DevOps at the end and in the basis are based on a philosophy and refer to a mindset. Both agility or DevOps or agile software development have values and principles. And our focus for today is DevOps, but I didn't want to forget, didn't want you to forget that DevOps builds over agility. And the values in agility, they started to say, we value more on how individuals interact over than having processes and tools. We value more having a system that is working, a software that is working, rather than having documents there. We value more to collaborate with the customer rather than writing or having contracts and negotiating contracts. We value more responding to change and instead of following a plan. These values are nice, and these values support, and it is proven that agile software development had helped organizations to produce software faster. The issue for security, or the situation with security compliance, is that in compliance, the things that are on the right are the most that required. So we need processes, we need comprehensive documentation, there should be nice explanations of everything, there should be a plan for an auditor to say, okay, you are security compliant. This, of course, brings some challenges for security compliance. If we talk about DevOps, DevOps has this value of collaboration. So DevOps started with the idea that development teams and ops teams should collaborate more. Development engineers developing code and the engineers that take care that the system is working in production should collaborate more, and they should have some practices that let them go for achieve the same goal, which is having a system that is running. In DevOps and agility, there are also principles, the so-called principles. If I would like to focus on DevOps, and one of the biggest, so the DevOps movement started with the idea of feedback loops, which means that any activity that is being done during the development process provide an output, and these outputs should be used as input for another activity in the process. And this is the feedback loop. So there should be a way that if somebody is producing an artifact, another team, another part of the process is using this artifact. This means that the same development process becomes a system, and they have this, and this is the systems thinking. If we think about security and what these principles affect security, let me show you this left shift and continuous everything. And this is the principle that most refers with security, because shift left concept means that we start doing the things as early as possible in the chain. So from development to operations, we do it as left as possible. And this is, of course, nice for security. Instead of setting patches when the system is in production, it is better that we start thinking on the threats of the system before. Or it's better that we patch as early as possible, or even it is better that we learn, that we know that there are softwares have vulnerabilities before we put it in production. And this is, and avoiding to send something in production that has vulnerabilities will always be better. The other perspective to look at agility and DevOps are the practices. And here you have seen some of them already, I am sure. Most of you said that you work in DevOps context and also in agile software development context, so I assume you know that. But if I would like to rephrase is, if we look at the practices, we know that there are agile software development talks about iterations and incremental development. So producing software in increments, improving the system in increments. And for DevOps, we should have heard about continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment, which means producing software. A developer in their station sit down and produce a software. And in the moment that there is a new portion of software that he was working on, this gets integrated into the whole system. And this can happen every day or can happen many times a day. And the benefit of this is that in any moment of time, there is a software, a system that it is working with the last version as possible. For DevOps, there are methodologies, I may say. So, and this is how you team implement the DevOps pipelines, including the continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline. So you have seen, some of you said you work in DevOps environments. I assume that when you say DevOps, it means that you have a CI/CD pipeline. And this means that CI/CD pipelines are configured by engineers, which imply that they're in the more the companies, the more the engineers, the more the types of pipelines. So we cannot say that there is an only way to build up a pipeline. Engineers decide how to build up pipelines depending on the needs. If we want to summarize this, we can say that agile development and the life cycles of agile development and DevOps have these phases. So you have seen these phases: plan, code, build when the developer codes, build when the system is integrated, test when the system is proven or validated for that accomplished requirements, release when there is the system that we say, okay, this can be the system we can be sent to production. Deploy is the phase where we get the system into production environment. At this point, a customer can already use the functionality of the system. And then there are two phases: operate, which is in a stage where engineers take care that the system is working, and monitor, where they analyze and look continuously if the system is performing well. An agile software development lifecycle covers the plan, so the requirements until the release, and the DevOps lifecycle covers from plan to monitor. So from the moment that the customer has a need and said, I want to have some functionality, until this is in production, until it comes another need. And this in continuous environments like agile development and DevOps happens so often and every day. So developers are continuously coding and producing functionalities to satisfy customers' needs that at the end, it is complicated. If you want to achieve compliance or you think from the perspective of security, you need to understand what happens in each of the phases, what security activities are in each of the phases. And if we think on the security standard, you will be able to, it becomes complex.
Fabiola, I think we have a question that we should take right now. It is from Jonathan in chat.
Thank
so
you.
it is CI/CD as with Jenkins, for example.
Yeah, okay. So Jenkins is a tool that helps us to orchestrate activities. And this is one of the tools that were more used to do continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines to implement. Thank you. I cannot see the chat, so if you can support me with the question, would be really nice. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not focusing on that. Okay, any other question? So when we talk about agile development and DevOps life cycles, and in this lecture, why is this for you important? I brought some excerpt of the State of Agile report, which explains how important is DevOps currently for companies. If you look here, 56% of the respondents in this study said that they already have a DevOps initiative running on. 18% are saying, okay, we are planning a DevOps initiative. Working in with DevOps life cycles or working in DevOps environments is the current trend, and it is currently, and it will be there for the upcoming years. If we look at the importance, almost 50% of the respondents says, yes, DevOps is very important for us. And if we looked at here on the left, you have the charts we saw before, and this is DevOps. But if we look at about agile development, and I said DevOps is built on the agile mindset. These are numbers already higher. So 94% report their company is practicing agile development. So understanding how security compliance works in this continuous environment, iteratively, incrementally, with the practices of continuous integration pipelines, with continuous delivery pipelines, it is important. The times where security compliance was like for big systems, like with phases, very linear phases, are still there. For industries, is still a reality. But more and more, this is becoming important because product engineers are building up software with this context, DevOps and agile development. So let's go to the takeaway number 3. Companies and also industrial ones. So you would see companies building up autos, building up, focusing on energy, focusing on factories. All companies are becoming software-based companies. What does it mean? That they produce software, that the basis of the operation is software. These software-based companies deliver software to productions continuously. This means faster because, as said before, a developer is coding something in his station, and then in their station, and then when they submit the software, this is immediately integrated by a pipeline. You mentioned Jenkins. So with a pipeline run with Jenkins, with a continuous integration tool like Jenkins, this is integrated into the system, and this can even go directly to production. Any increment, any new portion, any new functionality that satisfies a need of a customer can be in production environment in 1 day, 1 month. So for software-based companies like Amazon or Netflix, there are new updates per second hundreds of updates in a day, new versions of the software going on and on. And if we would think about the security of these systems or the security of the process, the bet that we do here is that the desired secure software product development process, desire means the one that you want to comply with. If it is a standardized, nice. If this is the one of your company, so the company has a secure development process that want to comply. This secure development process should consider already continuous flows, which means this continuous integration, and also includes operational phases, because the difference between agile development, you remember here, security standards cover the development life cycle. So more let's say they are more compatible with agile software development life cycle. But to cover with DevOps, secure development process should also include these phases. So in this bet that we are doing, so now we are again in front of the machine and said, okay, I want to comply with this standard. Yeah, nice. Then this is the secure development process I would like to have. Nice. And is this secure development process considering that my company works in the DevOps context? If we look at this example standards, the 6244341 standard, the 8 chapters that I mentioned you before are here up distributed. And these phases, the operational phases, are only covered partially by the standard. So this means that product security engineers, that development engineers, that business owners, any stakeholder can think of, let me come back to something. If we come back to takeaway number 1, compliance with security standards reduce risk. So I told you we will go back to this later. So let me come back to this step. If the standard is not covering all of the phases of development, the bet of, yeah, if I comply with standards, I reduce risks, you win or you lose in this bet. So not necessarily the message is not because you comply with the security standard, it means that you cover all the risks in your process. And now, if you are thinking about DevOps and agile development, and you think about the life cycle, you need to look for standards. You need to be sure that security standards cover also operations and not only the development phases. With the standard for NIST, this is a bit more nicer because NIST already includes some requirements to operations, and here are they highlighted. One of the, for example, here they said, configure the compilation, interpreter, and build process to improve executable security. So this means this requirement also goes to the way that the integration works. So with the build process, if we look at here, confirm vulnerabilities on an ongoing basis. So vulnerabilities and confirming vulnerabilities on an ongoing basis means monitoring them. When the system is in production, there should be, the standard already says you should have activities to determine, to see if, to validate if there are vulnerabilities in the system. Not all of the standards. So NIST is a standard that is continuously evolving, and then they are at the end consistent, I would say, more with continuous software engineering. But for the IEC 6244341, the difference is that this standard is in the world of industrial automation systems, and industrial and automation systems, there are more linear processes that continues. But this does not mean that there are not the teams in industry working in DevOps. You raise your hands, some of you, and you may be working in industrial companies already in DevOps context. Before continuing, is there any question or comment? Can you raise hands if you're still interested into going forward? Thank you. Okay, good. Then let's move forward. Let's talk about security compliance in agile development and DevOps. So let's go into a bit of details. Important is that we recognize that when we talk, so in the lecture, the topic was DevSecOps Compliance. I like to have the title DevSecOps because it's the common word for practitioners, it's the common word for engineers to think about DevSecOps. There is, last year, in 2018, there was a new standard for DevOps that was released by IEEE. But in the last year, it became an ISO standard. It's the 3675. And the standard explains that DevOps security sometimes is referred as DevSecOps, but DevOps at the end has already a security in the focus, because continuous integration supports security per se by nature. Continuous automation reduces human risks, and therefore is really good for security purposes. And also because this continuous integration allows, as said before, with the principle of shifting left, allows to find vulnerabilities earlier. What is important from the security compliance perspective is to understand what are the aspects of DevOps, which means inside this loop of DevOps, in each of the stages of DevOps, so we saw before plan, code, build, test, release, deploy, operate, and monitor, there are people, processes, and technology involved. If we think again in the example of doing threat modeling here in the plan phase, for the threat modeling, there are roles involved in the threat modeling. There is a process, there is a way to do threat models. So to have first an overview of the system, second to say from where it comes the threats. So what are is our system exposed in the network? Is the system belong to only to our network? And what are the threat actors, and so on and so on. So the process of doing threat modeling, and then it also comes the technology. So is it possible to automate threat modeling? Is it possible to have tools that support better perform threat modeling? These three aspects, people, process, and technology, needs to be analyzed when you try to comply with security standards. If we move forward to what the actors are, again, a simplification. There are two big group of actors for security compliance. First one is the internal group, and the second, the external group. The internal group can have several roles. You have business owners, and regularly from my experience, business owners have many ideas about security compliance, but I'd say one common factor is that they think it's expensive. Why is it expensive? Because if you need to keep your engineers working and in implementing requirements of security standards, if you're a business owner and said, my engineer should take 1 week to implement the standard, and the engineer should take 1 week in producing functionalities that the customer asked, what would you do? Would you go for the first or for the second approach? So normally what customer wants goes first. If a customer is paying to get some functionality in your system, even if it is not a direct customer paying per functionality, but if this is a model where you produce some functionality that is part of your business model, of course, this get more attention from business owners. And normally, customers do not pay for security compliance with the standards. Compliance with the standards is at the end a desire of the company, or also is a demand from a regulator so you can do business, but not necessarily something that you can monetize from. The project team normally thinks that security compliance is a requirement. In the last years, there is a change so there are studies, surveys that demonstrate that project teams more and more feel ownership for security. So they don't say security is the responsibility of the security team, but they say, okay, security is the responsibility of all of us. This is nice for security, but compliance, which means I apply security based on what a standard says, is not yet something they say, yeah, I like to comply. As a team, we would like to be compliant. Some teams do, sometimes don't, but at the end, they see compliance as something that needs to be done, a requirement, not something that we would like to have. For the security team, security per se is value, and they like from standards the systematic approach they have, because they explain well what needs to be done. But of course, this explains well is something that happens in that can normally security teams, for them it is clear. But when you talk to the project team, security standards are more complex than what you can expect. And there are also internally some assessors, consultants, quality managers, people that are enabling compliance with security standards, and they do see security compliance as enablers for businesses. So there are standards like the ISO 27001 that when a company gets these standards, get certified, they get a seal, and customers look at, okay, it's an ISO 27001 company, certified company, then I can trust more that they will protect my data. Or this company is certified with the standard. If we don't think only about security, let's think about privacy. For example, there is this standard GDPR. If a company complies with these guidelines of the GDPR, then we can say, okay, this is an organization where I can give my personal data because they will treat it well. Of course, you will prefer somebody that is certified than somebody that is not certified. Well, not of course, but maybe, because you would prefer. At the end, it depends. It also depends on the marketing thing, but it's a good thing for marketing. And in the external actors, we have the auditors. And for auditors, at the end, compliance is evidence. So if they would like to give you this seal that you are compliant with some standard, they will look at the evidence that this is happening. And the difference from some standards, one of the difference from getting compliance or not is that some standards are desired standards to be compliant with. Like I would like to have IEC 6244341 for my development process, let's say. But some companies are compulsory, must comply with the standards. Like let's use the ISO 27001. In some countries, in some companies, or for some businesses, it is compulsory to comply with this standard. And then, even independent of what the internal actor said, the external, they need to comply. And the one that has the voice is the auditors. And the teams must do what they do, what the auditor said. So I want you to do an exercise. So can you get a hat? The blue hat is the head of the security compliance auditor. So now let's move to you want to comply with the security standard as a company. You want to bring your development process, your DevOps process for compliance, and you hire an auditor, and the auditor comes and tells you, sorry, I jumped. Yeah, and the auditor comes and show you this. This will be a part of the requirement of the IEC 6244341 standard, and said, hey, you want to comply, you want to make your DevOps compliant with this standard, so read this requirement. So I will take nicely, you can take 1 minute to read. Please do the exercise. If you're done, please raise hands. Time is almost up. Mhm. Okay, time's up. Thank you very much. So, Jonathan, you were the person raising hand. How do you feel? How did you feel reading this? Or those that raise hands, would you like to share? How did you feel?
So Jonathan wrote that he thinks that it covers much, in his opinion.
Yeah.
And a question mark. So yeah, that maybe it is too much, I think. That is something Jonathan meant.
Thank you. Yeah, now I have the chat also here. It covers much, I think. Yes, it's big.
Yeah. Can I ask a question here? When we talk about CI/CD and this process, is this the whole thing that you check all the time, or are you only revisiting a few of these every time you make a deployment?
Is your question if you check this this requirement, if this requirement should apply every time?
Yeah, it is. Well, I understand they should, but it's also, I mean, I'm thinking in the context of automation, automated testing, that we could get the compliance and these requirements into the automated testing.
Yes, you can have this. Can we leave? Can I hold your the answer for some minutes? Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I think we will answer your question. Thank you. So going with this example, if then you Anna, you jumped to the second part, which is now you get the head of the compliance assessor or the internal actor, and you need to bring this into your pipelines. And one thing you can do is automate. But the question is, could you automate everything? And Anna, here is your answer. To see how you bring this into the pipelines, you need to bring up from the requirement to analyze where are the security activities, and which in this standard are marked with this rectangle, and which of them can be automated. So when you said in the CI/CD pipeline, can I do some automation? Yeah, maybe you can automate a static code analysis, but you cannot automate, for example, secure coding, identification of secure coding standards, like delivering a list of standards, a list of guidelines on how to write secure code. So not everything in DevSecOps, not everything in compliance, security compliance of DevOps can be per se automated and can only be seen in the pipeline. Because there are other things, like in this example, even is the examination of threats. So analyzing threats is a human process. You need to sit down. So project engineer, business owner, security engineer need to sit down, collaborate, if we think about DevOps, and discuss how your system can be attacked. And this activity cannot be automated at all, because this is the reasoning. Until now, we don't know with the evolution of machine learning algorithms and so on, of there could be, but so far, this is still a manual process. Anna, I hope I could answer a bit your question. I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so more to come. So what then, if in this example you realize that not everything can be automated, what needs to be done? What can really the project team do? And then let's go. This is an overview. Yeah, I know that for the lecture, this will look like, okay, it's a sequence, but at the end, when you are working on the projects, it's more complex than this. But at least this is the sequence of steps that I would recommend you to follow in your organizations, and that I am also recommending the teams that I coach with regard to develop security compliance in DevOps. I recommend them to do, and this is also a working practice. So first of all, you need to zoom into this loop. Yeah, and you saw before, so there are in these slides I'm using these two views, so the regular loop of DevOps, but zoom in and get the phases like in sequential only for model purposes. You have the head now, like the nice cap of the project team. And when you zoom in, you need to look at where in these DevOps stages where can be a map with the standard you want to comply with. In this example that you are looking, this is compliance with the IEC 6244341, and the chapter secure implementation is the chapter where you read the standard. So let me come back here. You read the standard. This was the SI1, the requirement from secure implementation. So this practice, for this particular example, fits with the code phase, code stage, and a bit of the build stage of DevOps. Make this match. Look where can it be that you do this. Then go to this step. We talked about this right before. Look at which of the activities can be automated. And then you need to have a data flow. You need to understand the purpose of the standard. And you need to look at if there are tools that can do this. And somebody mentioned Jenkins. So Jenkins the practice is a good orchestrator. In the meantime, in the last 3 years, this changed a lot since these big companies like the ones that started as code repositories already integrated orchestrators like GitLab or GitHub. So Azure also, some companies, some teams are already using these platforms, not only for code repository management, but also as orchestrators. And it's a balance that you need to do. It's an analysis you need to do if you want to use this to still continue using orchestrator and several external tools like Jenkins, for example, or you want to have something that is natively integrated with your code repository management tool. And look, for example, this is when the developer push codes, there should be version control, orchestration, etc. So again, this is a zoom in into the how this works for you. So in the loop, there is the staged code, but how this code phase works for you depends on the way that you in your company, depends on how your pipeline is configured. Even in the same company, in the same project team, there may be several pipelines, so many different pipelines that it's necessary to look and understand them very well. If you are the project engineer, then you already know how they work, which is this nice thing. Then you need to go to the other side and understand this requirement of the standard. Another thing that you need to do is see who will be responsible for the security activities. Being compliant means that some person can be related with some activity. So for example, in this particular requirement of the standard, which team should be in charge to configure the pipelines and the tools? Does developers understand the coding standards? If we think about coding standards being guidelines to write secure coding, is necessary that there is the coding standard, that the standard, I'm not referring to the security standard, but the coding guidelines. If there is a guideline to do secure coding, you need to be sure that the developers understand and that they can consult them easily. Also, is the product owner tracking how much effort you need to build and support the pipeline? This is in no security standard. We'll talk about somebody analyzing efforts of implementing any security requirement. But when we look at the actors, the business owners think this is expensive because they now, with DevOps, for example, they don't need to only track to have a security requirement implemented, but also they need to track that there is an infrastructure to support the development. So this infrastructure is the CI/CD pipeline. And maintaining the pipeline means also that engineers are busy, and means also that there should be a product owner managing the work of these engineers and the requirements of the pipeline, which is again costly, because the customer will not pay you for having nice infrastructure to develop the software. And again, what we talked at the beginning, the business owner need to track the risk of the process. Getting a tool into the pipeline brings benefits because it automates, but it also opens more risks, because let's say that you think your system, you're analyzing the threats of your system that has let's say, 2 components. And now with DevOps, you have a pipeline, and the pipeline supports the system. And that means that this pipeline is a 3rd component. But sometimes for the business owners or for the product owners or for the whole team, it is not transparent that the system does not have 3 components, so 2 components of business and the pipeline, but they keep thinking only on the functionalities and not on the pipeline. And the pipeline also need management, also need resources. So if you're a developer, you need to follow the things in the backlog. So, okay, the customer wants this, wants this, but you also have tasks. Okay, add a tool in the pipeline, configure the tool of the pipeline, maintain the tool. And this again brings risks. Sometimes when they do the threat modeling, they focus on these 2 components and not in the pipeline. And there are also attacks that can happen in the pipeline. For example, if the access is not well configured to the code repository, on well configured means on the need to know principle. What if somebody makes a commit or an unintentional merge in a critical functionality, and then your system breaks? And these are only things about access management. So who will take care of the access in the code repository? This is again, more and more aspects that need to be analyzed when you want to achieve security. So you see, this is you're still with the cap of the team, and then it comes something. So the auditor, so this is nice. You have the cap and you're doing this. Yeah, nice. So you're matching the activities, you are implementing tools in your pipeline, you are looking for the responsibilities. And then it comes, and when it comes to compliance, so look at this example. What you see in this square are artifacts, the outputs of the whole process. This is based on a reference model for DevSecOps. I don't want to go in the details, but I want you to please focus on the heads. The ones that the artifacts, so these artifacts means there are outputs or inputs. So these are either files or documents or things that can be the very result of the process. So if you look at the head, at the blue head, this is what the auditor will look for when they want to tell you if you're compliant. So let's say 6. And all the others are artifacts in DevOps that project team, engineers team are delivering. So at the end, what the auditor is looking is only a part of your whole DevOps efforts. And some of these artifacts that the auditor sees are related to what you have. And this is the thing. When you want to work for security compliance, it makes more sense that you have by nature the artifacts that you produce, that your process naturally produce these artifacts, and that your auditor can see these artifacts, can use or can analyze the same artifacts that you produce. Sometimes in reality, teams produce the artifacts, the evidence of compliance, so the auditors can see, but they don't use these artifacts for their reprocesses. And this is inefficient. And this is also inefficient. And also, let's go back to key takeaway number 1. So compliance should reduce risk. If you produce security, if you as your company or team produce artifacts for compliance that are not related to your own process, then you can be compliant, but you are not secure. And with this, I would like to go to takeaway number 4, which is a summary. Internal and external actors have different perspectives about security compliance. So look at this. For them, for auditors, this is security compliance. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they would like to see a static code IDE analysis report. They would like to see a report of peer code review. They would like to see that you have coding standards and that you manage requirements for the product. Let's see. But for the team to achieve compliance or to achieve these artifacts, you need to do all of the other things. So it's necessary that companies achieve security compliance efficiently with their own development processes, not to separate things like here is what the teams does and here is what I want to do for compliance, but the bet we are doing, or the bet in the context of security compliance in DevOps, the bet is that the artifacts of your security process and the compliance evidence are the same. So basically here, if there is a report for static code analysis that you show the auditor, this report is the one that your team is using to understand what are the risks in your code, and not only something that your auditor will see and say, okay, check nice, but something that you really use. Because what we want to do is we want to win this bet. We want to win the bet that compliance with security standards will produce secure software. Where is this nice takeaway one? So here, we want to go here for the bet and say, yeah, spin off. If I comply with the standard, if my company complies with the standards, I am reducing risk. Good. Any question or comment until this point? Let me go back to, we are now in takeaway number 4. So security artifacts and security compliance are the same. Shall we move forward? Thumbs up. Let me make a bet. 5 people put the thumbs up. No, I lost my bet. There were only 4. Okay, 2 more. Nice. Good, thank you. Then let's move forward. And then this is, so what is the scope? And another topic is, what is the scope of security practices for compliance? So remember, takeaway number 1 is compliance with security standards reduce risks. Yeah, so basically, if I am compliant with the security standard, I am secure. These little boxes in purple are the security areas or practice areas in the code DevOps phase that are based in practice, that have seen in several teams in practice, that have documented in research papers. This is documented in the REFA model. This is a reference architecture for DevSecOps. So basically, if a team would like to have security in the DevOps phase code, they should focus in these boxes. The ones that have dark purple are engineering areas, related software engineering areas. This means not completely related to security, not related to security. And the ones in light purple are the secure software engineering areas. If you look at the secure software engineering areas, and we think that the blue hat is the standard IEC 6244341, you will notice that this compliance, the compliance with the IEC 6244341 will accomplish security for how many areas do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So at least 2 security related areas like these ones are not mentioned in the standard. So again, complying with the security standard not necessarily implies that you have secure products, because there are other aspects in DevOps where you need to use or you need to implement requirements of other standards. The head, for example, here, this orange head is what an auditor of another standard X will tell you, and this green will be what the standard auditor of standard Y will tell you. So I didn't want to mention the name of the standards here because this is like, for example, purposes, also a bit based on reality. There are many standards also that involve, but let me give you an example. Developer identity and access management. What we talk about, what if somebody gets access to my code repository and creates a merge request or merges some code that should not be merged? So managing the access of the developers to the code repository is something that is mentioned and 3 standards. Maybe not completely. I studied this in depth, and I think they didn't cover completely what needs to be done, or that at least you need to reunite 3 standards to say, okay, now I am secure. They mention from one perspective, but you cannot bet that only compliant with what the standard will bring you to complete the security aspects, because for example, the IEC 6244341 focuses on the processes, but the focus is not the data. Yeah, the 4.1 has a brother, which is the 4.2, or a sibling, 4.2, and the 4.2 talks about authentication, identification in any platform that relates to the system. So combination of the standards will bring you to security, to a full security bet. Let's say I will bet more for complying with several standards that complying with one, or maybe I would like to, if I could be the manager of some security product development process, I would need to, and what I would do is I would analyze which parts I am compliant, when I comply with one standard, what risks I am reducing. If you comply with the 4.1 and comply with NIST, you are reducing risks of the development process. But you also need to reduce risks of your application and your infrastructure. And then you need, for example, to comply with the cloud security standard. If you have a cloud environment, you need to comply with guidelines for the secure implementation of cloud environments. Okay, so key takeaway number 5. Teams feel ownership for security of their products. As I told you, surveys said that. So teams really want to improve security of the product. Companies improve security continuously, focusing on both. They need to focus on both, as said, in the process and also on the system security. Remember that the system has the application, the infrastructure, and also the data. Here, a remark. In compliance, security compliance for DevOps, I've hardly seen, and actually I didn't see yet standards or documentation that explain what can be done with regard to data in DevOps. There are some papers, yeah, but some specific requirements to manage data, and maybe it's an open thing for regulators. The bet we want to do here, again in front of the machine, is that companies achieve security compliance efficiently with the risk-based approach. So if you need to comply with all of this, or not need, but you want to be secure, and you would like to also achieve compliance, you need to think wisely, what are the first priorities? Get your team to produce software, also be compliant at the same time. And then in the next iteration said, okay, what is our next step? Teams jump directly to building up pipelines, but sometimes they forget the identity management or the protection of the secrets. So if you would like to invest your time into, into doing task A, B, C, and you need to decide what to do, managing good the credentials, how your tools communicate, or how you communicate to your cloud environment, or all the credentials to deploy in the operation environment. This is a thing to start with, because this will reduce a lot of risks. The risk-based approach is important, and also doing efficiently. Doing efficiently means that you don't waste time, you don't waste resources. This is also a lean mindset, reduce waste. So try or look for producing, achieving security practices in your DevOps phases that can also serve you for compliance purposes. Or if you invest time to comply with security standards, make them in such a way that you understand a full scope of how these standards also support you to be secure and how they can be linked to other standards. Summary of the takeaways. The first one, compliance with security standards reduce risks. So actually summary of our bets, right? Second, secure development processes deliver secure software. Yeah, it is. I think this is real in practice. So if you implement the development, secure development process and accept the development process or based on the standard, for sure, your software will be more secure than if you don't have it. Number 3, the secure software development process, the design process that you would like to have should consider the continuous flows, should consider also until the operational phase, not only the development. In DevOps is important, the whole view. For key takeaway 4, security-related process artifacts and evidence are the same. If you comply, if your process is producing some artifacts, make them be the evidence of compliance. This will also help you. Then you gain a lot from auditors, because auditors will not only say is there, is not there, but you can also be sure that you are producing something that improves the security of your products. And number 5, achieve security compliance efficiently with a risk-based approach. To me, and let me come back again before closing the lecture and asking and telling you some questions. Let me come back to this image. Everything has to do with risk. At what moment this rope will break? We don't know. But the risk-based approach is take the decisions to avoid them to happen. And if it happens, that you can be able to solve. Some people or some teams, let me say, strive a lot for compliance, and this can be very unmotivated when they don't accomplish well, because it's a complex thing. But doing this with the same collaboration mindset of DevOps, doing this as part of your own process, getting the security requirements of the standard in your backlog, in the backlog of your teams, getting them to think on how to do this better will really produce efficiently security compliance. And your teams will also feel better, because then you don't work for the auditor, you work for yourself, you work for this team ownership of security. With this, I close the lecture and would like to get your comments or questions. If there are any.
Maybe I could ask a question.
Thank you.
So you were talking a lot about different kind of artifacts that the development teams could use for themselves, and not only to produce these for the audit people. So maybe I come back to the same question that some of the other people in this class asked. So how often do you expect these artifacts to be produced? Because on the picture, my understanding that you showed, it's, I mean, you produce it for each iteration during the DevOps. Is that really possible to do it, or isn't it too much time consuming to do it? And yeah, exactly this picture. There are lots of different artifacts here.
So I could expect, I think the answer is, if you automate something and there is an activity, security activity that is automated, then the artifact should be produced every time that the pipeline runs, if the automation is integrated in the pipeline. Producing the artifact does not mean that you have this feedback loop, like that you use the artifact to improve security. Let me give you an example. This static code analysis. Yeah, in this case, this is an example of doing this at the IDE. But let's think that you are having a static code analysis during the build. So you have a Jenkins or you have any orchestrator. Anytime that there's an integration, this orchestrator calls for a tool to do a static code analysis, and then you get the report. If your pipeline is running 10 times per day, then you need to have this artifact 10 times per day. You will get, this is the nature. You will get the artifact. This does not mean that 10 times per day, your team will sit down and look at the report, right? And analyze and said, how could we correct? And this is a task for an area called security feedback loop, which is here. And this is what I mentioned. Some standards don't mention that. So code security feedback loop means this area means that you process these reports into saying, what should I solve? What should I do with the findings? And this analysis is where I would maybe not expect to have 10 times a day, maybe not daily. I think when this comes to process aspects, when you need to involve people, then you need to find the nicer way and the sweetest spot for your team. One nice thing to have is, for example, hardening sprints. So if you have every 2 weeks, one sprint, and then you have sprints of 1 week or 2 weeks, then you can set up one sprint to work in the findings of the repository. Another practice is to do this in the retrospectives. Another practice that I have seen, my main recommendation is that these solving findings should be a task in your backlog, that teams work on that people see how much time they invest. And what teams are doing is they get like, they define themselves to say 5%, 5% or 10% of our working time we will dedicate to solve security issues. And then they decide which ones. So if you have 10 tools producing 10 reports, security analysis of 10 different types, your team will work 5% of their time to solve the findings. And then let me close with this. And this analysis of the report and solving the finding is again a compliance artifact. And this compliance artifact, maybe you get only once per month. But even if you detect vulnerabilities daily, many times per day, the analysis and the solving is done once per week, once per sprint, once per month.
Yeah, no, but that's makes sense what you just said. So it's yeah, it explains some of the things I was wondering. And I also think when you mentioned the automation of some of the reports and tests, maybe you will not be able to view them every time you do the code update, but at least maybe you could save these reports somewhere, and then you could go back in the time and see that, okay, here we got this change or this issue at that point in time, and that then you can relate to what kind of code change you have made at that point. So it could be useful from that perspective.
Yeah.
Even though you maybe don't discover it or discuss it at that point in time.
Yeah, what you can also do is have nice scripts that extract, analyze the reports and give you updates of the critical things. So you don't wait until the end of the month to look at the reports, but when there is something critical, you get alerts. There are also practices like this that you decide which code is high risk. So this REFA model has like this for each of the phases. And one of the phases on the build phase is recommended to track what is the high risk code. And if there is a critical finding in high risk code, then you get an alert and then your team needs to work immediately. Because this is also nicer. And then this flow gives you more value. It reduces risks more than waiting at the end. So it is a risk-based approach. Good. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
If there are more questions, while you think on the questions, let us show you the upcoming courses of PROMIS. I think this.
So I just wanted to add that this approach, when artifacts are simply available, is something that is right now, that was implemented in the United States with the executive order. So the suppliers of software systems for the federal government need to have those artifacts that confirm that static code analysis was conducted, for example. But usually they will be required only when this federal agency that is deciding to buy this software system or not is requesting them. So of course it is recommended to make them available immediately, but overall artifact should be there just for the purposes of considering it. So Fabiola, thank you very much for this lecture. It was also a great summary of some important parts of our course, the things that we have considered. I think it was super nice that you have mentioned also such things that essentially we are dealing with risks, and we always need to think about risks first of all, and we need to have this risk-driven mentality. And in order to address risks appropriately, we also need to break those silos between different viewpoints. And also we have usually one single risk for the system, and also managers considering risks often in integrated manner. So they would like to see security, privacy, and compliance, and especially with new upcoming regulations, security and compliance risks need to be considered as in an integrated manner. And of course, application of threat modeling, for example, is one of these tools that requires breaking those silos in order to apply it. And of course, in order to achieve better security compliance, and especially in DevOps, as you mentioned, that DevOps is about breaking silos and also agile approach. So yeah, thank you. We're looking forward to invite you in the future, and I think already in autumn or in spring, also we will have another iteration for DevSecOps course. That was developed by Fabiola, so please check it. And also we have some upcoming PROMIS courses, application for which is open for autumn. So you can see the list of the courses here. Some of you are maybe already students or participants of some of the courses, but please check. We are also sometimes updating courses, so consider applying for the courses. And if you have any questions, please you can contact Anna Eriksson or Monique Johansson. You can see their emails here. So thank you for joining us. Yes, you can also check entry requirements on our website. Thank you very much for changing the slide. So yes, but please approach us in case you have any questions. Thank you for joining us today. See you and have a nice day then.
See you. Have a nice day.
Bye.